build comms core around this, and also using some of the funds that are left for marketing. And we want to aim at surviving at least like another year with the current funds and see how we can make it work. But like we also don't want to take any like unfair decisions, so we'll see how far we can pretty much just like stretch these funds. And we were also talking about like some kind of assessment that we can have over teams. We know that in the case of 3 teams, there were like 3 great examples of deliveries, and then we had 2 other teams that have not delivering these projects that are still pending. And at the same time, we're trying to structure communications to work more as a core unit, and like have a better use of funds. We also have a few ideas on like on the table, especially around production and just like projects that we would like to look into. But as I was mentioning to Manu in the previous meetings, we feel that it's very, very important that we deliver before we start planning whatever's next. So yeah, it's just like making sure that we can all like collaborate and like contribute to have like delivery, and from there on keep asking ourselves like how far can we reach like our experiments. So as I would push for this like kind of like assessment, but once everyone is back from vacation. So probably after next week, I would like to like prepare something that kind of like reflects on what we learned for teams, and from there on just like be open about the new decisions that we're taking about how we're managing funds and how we plan to keep like operating and stewarding communications in general. So yeah, I mean it's not something that we can go over a single agenda topic, of course, and there are many implications around taking these decisions. But yeah, like right now, what I wanted to do as soon as I came back from vacation was to like jump on this and start these discussions. So judging on how they went in the last call, correct me if I'm wrong, like anyone that's here that was in the last call, but I thought that there was already like a very clear idea of where everyone is contributing, and I do feel that we can make it work with what there is. So yeah, I'm gonna be just like putting a lot of effort into functioning just the proper way so that we can keep the communications both afloat. And once we figure that out, keep getting involved in whatever changes we are adapting to, and yeah, kind of like build this new wave, of just contributing to the TEC, and see where can we get with this. So yeah, that's what I can add. I don't know if someone else would like to complement this whole communications decisions topic with anything.
And is there still is there still a lot of people within teams? So that was a pretty big call, and I know most of you were in this call right now. Currently, we're in that call as well. I guess the hard thing, because I know that at one point you wanted to try to reduce it to a core team, and if that becomes a difficult or an obstacle, are there alternatives that we can explore in terms of making sure that everybody feels empowered to contribute, but also managing expectations around in terms of like compensation, working group stuff, the intricacies of it?
Well, so far, we wanted to like open the topic, especially around like where are you contributing, where do you feel comfortable contributing. there are, like, for example, cases like the T Academy team in which some of the contributors are not like as active, or like they're not able to be as present as they were before, but um like Angie Berry got, like started getting compensation from the T Academy directly. So like we are like happy that we could provide, like communication or value in this case to the T Academy. But as soon as they like got a new contributor on board from our initiative, I feel that we can move on to more, let's say, like appropriate decisions. So we will no longer be providing communication services to the T Academy, but one of the contributors already is like contributing without being dependent on the TEC. So I feel that that is like one of the examples. And then on the other side, we have like a list of active contributors in one way or another. I mean, and this is independent from compensation and like everything that surrounds it. We still have some discussion to do around this, but we're pretty much talking about so me, Acid Laser, Mount Manu, Efra, Miguel, Enti. They are all currently contributing with one or two things, and they all mentioned like, okay, so I'm feeling comfortable around this, and this is where we want to take it from. From what people perceive like that they are contributing with value to the TEC. So we're mostly going to be shaping the core team from these integrants for the team, and yeah, see how we can adapt and have a better management of the funds available to do this and move on like from here.
That sounds really awesome. Sounds really good. I will stress the importance that, as we kind of scale down and get a little bit more focused, that the reward system becomes extremely important. And so our use of praise, our ability to praise one another, and making a good example and good habits out of that, and making sure that the people that do show up to contribute freely, that they understand that it is being used pretty consistently. So I just want to stress that importance. Did anybody else have any thoughts on the comms transformation stuff? All right.
I think we, yeah,
Yeah, go
mainly
ahead.
we already discussed it during marketing call, and then again polished it again during the comms call. I agree with Chewy. I think NT does as well. Miguel too, and Acid Laser. So if anything, we'll just polish um, privately, maybe during calls with one another. But I think overall, we agree with the overall direction that we're taking.
Sounds good. I actually haven't checked Gardens or Snapshot in a second, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that real quick. Also, I kind of want to give first round of thoughts. Tam, went through the process of really articulating this stewardship transformation, and I feel like we didn't really have an open space to discuss it and how people feel. I mean, we have, but with this particular group of individuals. So I just want to open the floor for that. And if you have any thoughts on the steward transformation, what are the first concrete things we can do to actually go into implementing that right away? And how do you see the separation between things like your working groups, like the stewards working groups, and the commons stewards? So that distinction between the common stewards and the working group stewards, how do you think their relationship should be kind of dealt with on a daily basis or a week-to-week basis, and how we use this phone call, for example, or this call here? I'll open the floor to that.
Would you give like a brief recap of the transformation? Because I read the forum post really briefly, and I don't remember everything there.
Say it again, Inti, the forum post.
Yeah, I gave a quick read to the forum post, and I don't really remember like all the details of the transformation. So if you could, go very quickly over what's proposed.
We can do that. Give me one second. Okay, so what we have here is we have our working group stewards, our common stewards, and our advisory stewards, which is kind of the alumni stewards. The common stewards are going to be a group of 2 to 4 individuals that will focus on kind of the broad commons goals, and not so much with the day-to-day of the working groups themselves. They will be focused kind of on the roadmap for the commons, and this is kind of larger macro picture stuff, and kind of guiding it from there. And they're supposed to be guiding the direction of the working groups. And so I'm trying to figure out a way to incorporate not only a new sprint planning process that we tried out for the first time this past week, but as well as with the working group stewards. How do we interact with one another? So like if there's if there's a working group steward and there's a common steward, like what is the relationship that is defined between that barrier? What type of information do you need? Do you need to have pushback on? Do you need to be contributing to? And so those are the kind of areas that I'm really curious about in this topic. And then as well as this barrier here between common stewards and advisory stewards. It's really interesting to see this setup, and I'm really excited that this setup can be executed on. I'm just kind of I kind of want to hear from others just to understand their perspectives on like what they think are kind of obstacles, risks, good ideas, bad ideas, whatever it may be. Yeah. So if you get a chance. Hi, Kendry. Welcome.
Well, go ahead, Juan.
Yeah. What sometimes I'm still a little bit like curious about is the nomination process, because it says like nominated by stewards, nominated by stewards, and nominated by stewards. And I feel that there should be more clarity on this nomination process. Maybe if it's going to be on a snapshot, or how are we gonna do it? Because I just don't want that process to be like, hey, yeah, like a closed thing. And I think if we are going to give some of the people the opportunity to be that role, we should also allow for the people that want to take that role to present themselves. So I don't know. I think there should be somehow a good process on the choosing and the nomination process. And here is still a little bit vague.
I agree with that. I think that, I think the common steward probably is the only barrier to which I would say that there are kind of like requirements for it. I would say that the people who do the common stewardship should have, a good committed amount of hours as it is articulated, and a good amount of history and knowledge of the TEC. And so those are the only prerequisites for that. And honestly, the working group stewardship, that might be able to be just done by the actual working groups, like I don't see why the current steward working group and the stewards within those working groups should dictate who who kind of becomes the steward of that working group. If the comms wants to, nominate Acid Laser, or Gravity wants to nominate, Gideon or Durgadas, like that, that's your prerogative, and that's something that that's the person going to be representing you when it comes to the table in terms of the TEC. And so I think that's fine, but other people may have thoughts on that as well. So I'll keep the floor open for it. Dun, 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 dun. Nobody?
Yeah, I have some thoughts. Yeah, I agree on what you guys are saying, and I have two thoughts. I have like the question or some of the confusion of how it's gonna look like also for some stewards that maybe could play the two roles, like as a working group steward and as a community steward. I think that could happen. I think there are some people in the community that in a way are kind of like taking those two roles already. So more specifically in regards to this proposal, I don't know how would that look like and how would that affect their workload. And at the same time, I'm also wondering in terms of the amount of people, the amount of stewards, and compared to the amount of active contributors we have currently in the community. I think right now it's kind of hard to say because a lot of people it's on vacation, right? So I feel that one of the concerns before used to be that there were like a lot of stewards. I think it got to the point that there were like 16 stewards, if I'm not wrong. So I mean, I don't know what would change with this, right? Maybe we could have again 16 stewards now plus 4 from the community plus 6 from the advisory. So how are we gonna maybe control that cap of stewardship so it doesn't become, again, I guess, a little too complicated in terms of coordination and organization? And maybe, yeah, I think at the same time it would be important to revisit the active working groups that exist right now, and if maybe some of them might take the shape of something different that could help with making the operations in the TEC kind of like simpler and more efficient, and this could be translated again in the stewardship positions. So yeah, more than answers, I have like those kind of questions right now.
Yeah, that was a really good point. In terms of the active working groups, it's really difficult to say because we have working groups that seem dormant and then they come back and you're like, oh, there's 8 people in here. Why? When did this happen? And so, yeah, I guess the hard part is like, yeah, we did have a lot of stewards. We did have a lot of active working groups as well. And so if we're going to cut that down, the amount of stewards that we have should be reflective of working groups plus the common stewards. Everyone else, the alumni stewards and stuff like that, that should be kind of left. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly. I think it's kind of like an honorary type of advisory role, but outside of that, they'll, if they make contributions, they'll be within a working group themselves or not.
Yeah, and I guess the deal will be also like what Juanco was saying about like the process of voting on that type of stewards will also have to be figured out, right? And in terms of the working groups, I'm thinking like, for example, we could talk about the example of Omega, right? Omega is like what you're saying. Sometimes it's like empty, there's no one there, and sometimes it's like busy, there's full of people there, right? So how can we envision and reimagine the operations and the function of these type of groups in the TEC, right? I go back with this idea of maybe they become from working groups to like interest groups. I think that's really good. And maybe an interest group doesn't really need to have a steward, right? Because they are actually not doing work and are more like places where people just gather and talk, and maybe like cool projects can come up from there, right? Like, I mean, that's totally valid too, but more as as um, an initiative than like a formal working group needing of a steward. And maybe that could happen with a couple of working groups as well. I don't know. That's just like a thought.
Yeah, and I think that brings in back into the like, what is the purpose of a steward? You know, it's one of those things where it's like, you know, at the end of the day, the role and function that a steward provides for a working group, specifically a working group steward, is to be an interface between the working group and the rest of the community, and to be able to kind of update them, to guide them, to kind of facilitate the meetings. But that's not even necessary. Sometimes I do think that, you know, having the working group stewardship allows for this focus and pressure to be placed on one person, when I think very kind of a responsible and distributed way of doing things would be to kind of distribute that authority within the working group, having people have different authority and powered over certain areas of you know, the comms working group, for example, like Chewy and Acid Laser and like all the Manu. Like, you guys are more than capable of facilitating any meeting there ever needs to happen. And so when it comes to having a steward for that working group, like, you know, what is the purpose of that? When, you know, each of you are more than capable of representing that working group to the rest of the community and to the stewards council or whatever. So, go ahead.
Yeah, so upon reading these and actually upon doing some research on the issue that we decided that we voted on during last week's, I think it was the Stewards Council. So I've pivoted a little bit instead of trying to understand our DAO as holons, holarchies, and colonic networks. A holon is something that is both a whole and a part. So think of it like a working group is both its own thing, but it's also a member of a DAO, and that is a type of organization that occurs in nature a lot, in atoms, in molecules, in tissue, etc. So I was just trying to mimic that or biomimic that. I've decided to go more into treating our DAO as a complex adaptive system, and so so complex adaptive systems, they utilize, you know, one or more levels of feedback. You know, they exhibit, you know, emergent properties and self-organization. They have like non-linear dynamic behavior. So it sounds very engineering, but fortunately we can use CAD to like model, and also we can use like agent-based modeling to you know, model some of the assumptions, like the practices that we do within the people. I think within the common steward, I see it says there that build feedback loops between entire stewardship and keep it right. I think it should be more rigorous. Like, we're the token engineering commons, and we're not doing token engineering for our own organization. So I think, I mean, there ought to be at least one common steward that can do some sort of modeling on some of the processes that are happening here. You know, be that the buyers and sellers of TC, the contributors, you know, taking into account endogenous market conditions, which is the liquidity and the volatility of our own market within the TC, of the TC token, and also exogenous. You know, if the price of ETH crashes, then BTC crashes. So I'm doing research on that, and I'd be happy to. I'm actually, you know, gonna present something regarding that, because I think what led us to where we are right now is that we didn't model properly, yeah. So I think what I'm trying to say is, I think for the common steward, like once you get into that role, there ought to be some sort of training, or at least one of the four people there needs to have the ability to model a lot of the processes that we have, and from then test the assumptions, because for the longest time we operated under the wrong assumptions, and it led us to where we are right now. So I think to prevent that from happening again and to maneuver where we are right now, I think there ought to be more modeling. As a byproduct of that, one of the concerns of Enti, which I agree, is that we haven't been creating the proper environment for token engineers to actually come. Like, there's not a lot of resources for them, or there's not a lot of reasons for token engineers to hang around our community other than the culture. We have created tools for them, yes. And we have funded, projects such as the CatCat community and the T fundamentals, but there's really not a lot of sort of Web3 data science going on, or boot camps, or things that, or CatCat introduction courses, or even things like that, right? So to summarize, I think once you are a common steward, either once you're a common steward or to be nominated a common steward, you need to be able to do complex adaptive dynamic modeling. So that is what I think. I think that would prevent some of the mistakes that we have in the past, and we're trying to become more resilient, right? So resilience 1.0 is sort of like when you have a structure in place that prevents tension from breaking your system. But resilience 2.0 is when there's tension into your system, and the system actually grows stronger from that tension. Think about muscles, right? When you go to the gym, you break out the fibers and they grow stronger and you get bigger. So that's what I'm envisioning for our commons, that the current position that we're in, that we use that expertise, we use that experience and the issues that we're encountering, and that it makes us stronger. But for it to make us stronger, we need some rigorous modeling and some type of training. So that's my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with. We definitely need to have more modeling and more efforts in that area. I think that the requirement for stewardship, though, should be a little bit more open than that. I don't know too many people who can actually do complex adaptive system modeling and agent-based modeling with purpose. And that's the one thing that's really difficult to get into. But I think having a dedicated
maybe the advisory steward. I don't know if it could be the common steward, but I do think within one of the three groups of stewards, we ought to pick one person who can do it and who has the availability.
I think that would be something, because we do have a lot of token engineers within the advisory role, that kind of advisory council, like you said. I think that would be really interesting to be like, hey, common stewards are requesting that you model out this process or token design, this utility for this token. Can we do that and get some feedback for the rest of the community? I think that would be really interesting. But I do think having training for the people who are in common steward is very, very important. The ability to facilitate, the ability to kind of go through and I don't know, just the soft skills that are required to actually navigate a large macro roadmap for the TEC in the long term is really, really a difficult thing. And perhaps maybe we could talk about how we want the nomination process to work. I know, Wonka, do you have some thoughts on that? I know you mentioned it before, that you were worried about it or were curious about it, but I don't know if you had any tangible ideas for it. You there, Wonka? Does anybody else have any thoughts on the nomination process in terms of like what we actually do moving forward?
I have some thoughts on the role itself, I guess. At least from what's there on your screen. I don't think the value proposition is articulated properly, and it's like feels like the comms steward is in a blurry line in between the working group and the advisory. And while I do certainly agree that there's some stuff regarding the stewardship that may not fit into any of those groups, other groups of the stewards, I would probably consider it part of the steward working group. Anyways, so like what I thought is, for example, yourself, that you aren't. I would say you like. I mean yourself, Nate, that you aren't probably like a proper working group lead, but you still do a lot of things, especially on higher level stuff. Uh, I would I mean, call it what you want, but I would think of you more as a contributor to the steward working group than I don't know like
So yeah, you don't have to dance around. Yeah,
like I don't. I mean, it's pretty much the same, but I feel like putting that kind of thing, like in a special role instead of a working group, also gives the community sort of less power and over the whole process, because like it's easier to interact with a working group than with these um, specific group of stewards that may I guess with these roles that are a bit more high on our relatively flat hierarchy, it's harder to interface with them. So unless there's a really specific uh, value proposal to have like a strong separate group of former stewards, I would probably just throw most of that under the steward working group, because it is probably going to exist anyways.
yeah. So
I mean,
I think the advisory role of stewardship was intended to be kind of a like small interface that allows the common stewards to make bigger decisions and have the people that were previously there give better context for those decisions, because not everybody's going to have the historical context that that may be required to make decisions within any organization, for example. And so having that kind of advisory role is important, but I get what you're saying.
I mean,
go ahead.
I'm actually cool with advisory. I think I was chatting with Gideon this week, and we were chatting just about that. Like, we need more. The TC really needs more, more input from the leaders of the industry, let's say, about how we move the TC forward, because then we kind of sort of get lost in our own bubble. But I'm really talking more about the common stewards. That I don't know, like again, I would probably consider that part of the steward working group, but at least judging by the responsibilities rather than a separate steward group.
So instead of separating the common stewards from the working group stewards, you say, okay, this is just kind of a different. These stewards have different responsibilities and functions.
Yeah, I mean, because we will need the steward working group anyways, and those responsibilities, someone has to care for them, and like having a separate group that only stewards can nominate and etc. 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 But they still work a decently heavy amount of hours. I feel like creates a lot of separation and potential friction for the community, because it's easier to just interact with a former working group than with this kind of separate entity that we have to trust and that they will.
I agree, and I think using myself as an example was a really good idea for that, because it's like I'm not a working group steward, and the thing is that I go cross working groups. So like I participate in a bunch of different working groups, and I kind of keep information flowing between those working groups. And so that is a function that I pride myself on providing within the TEC, is that I have a good idea of what each working group is working on at any point in time. And so that role, however, is not recognized by either the working group stewardship or the commons stewardship necessarily. And so like that is the one aspect where I'm like, okay, this is probably a good example of like a role that could be nominated by other stewards, where it's kind of just like a on equal footing, but it's kind of like it's not a working group steward, but it's kind of a cross organizational stewardship type of
Yeah, and
function.
I think you do pretty great, and you should be compensated. But I just feel like it makes more sense for you to be sort of contributor to the steward working group, and I guess a steward anyways. But I don't see then the necessity for 3 separate categories of stewards. I don't know. Um, one thing I'm starting to think now that would probably make sense is, for example, taking the example of Libby, who sort of works on SoftGov, but SoftGov is not enough to like it doesn't ask for any budget, and so it would make sense to have like a special budget for those kinds of people that um, still provide value and on a higher level. And so now, again, I just think I see the benefits, but I would guess I'm coming to the conclusion that I would love to see a more clear path as to either choosing between being part of a working group or being part of this particular group of stewards. Because I think there's upsides and downsides to each one of them.
Thank you for that input, Inti. Go ahead, Juan.
Yeah, first of all, sorry, I was a little bit with my hands occupied, so I couldn't talk at that moment. But well, I think for the nomination process, we should use some of the tools that we have. Maybe Libby has more stake on what would be the right voting tool, or if there should be a voting. But yeah, I feel just that this could be really an inclusive process, and also something that draws my attention. And you know that I have been like in the loop of the Aragon ecosystem, and there was this vote a year ago to create something that was called the ESD, the Executive Sub DAO, and they choose 3 members to manage some funds. And now, 1 year after, that those 3 members are having conflict to see themselves and their agreements being funded by the DAO. So it's somehow like difficult, and what I am trying to say is that I don't want us to make mistakes that other organizations have been have made, and that this balance between centralization and decentralization is not easy to find. I will paste this in the chat of this channel so that you can see that this problem of okay, we have too much people and now we need to centralize more. This issue is not something that we are experiencing for the first time. It's something that gets to be experienced in DAOs, and then maybe we can go too much into a centralization way. So I think that it should be like really relevant, all those roles of like the advisor, and also having the most inclusive possible, the capacity to be nominated as a common steward.
Yeah, So is there generally a lot of pushback by everybody here in terms of like the transformation proposal still? Because if there's still kind of this, needs to be reevaluated, I think that maybe we should take some time to actually post in the forum, and then maybe even put it up to a vote on Snapchat again, just to see what the community signal is currently. But that is really up to how you guys like. Please do iterate to me now if you kind of or articulate to me now that this is something that you think should be reviewed again.
I think it would be worth it. I think it would be interesting. But now that you're raising this option, this came to my mind, and I'm wondering how everyone else feels about this in regards with kind of like the advice process that we have, and like submitting things for voting in Snapchat, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I read this on a tweet the other day, and I think it's a really interesting like symptom that you can find around in the house is that, for example, when you see like a proposal posted on Snapchat, and you're like the 5th or 10th person voting, and you see like the other 9 voting, it's really hard for people to vote no, even though they probably don't agree. Yep. Right? They usually follow like what the majority of people are voting on, and it's I've kind of like trying to pay attention to that here in the TEC, and it's kind of true. Like usually we apparently agree on everything, but then for example, you have these spaces where people are able to express themselves like more, and you realize that maybe there are still some things to work on, that maybe it's not like yes or no, like radically, but it has to be more work done there. And then you have like the forum post, right? The forum for people to discuss, but this is again another problem that we face, right? Like the lack of activity and the lack of participation of community members in the forum. So again, you question the same thing, right? Is this actually helping us get into an agreement, or is this actually helping us collaborate and build upon something better, or is it maybe some room to improve the advice process that we have? And I just say this like with really careful words, because I feel that this advice process is like something really valued and really important here in the TEC, and I don't want to say it's wrong, but like I think we were talking about this the other day with your guys as well. Like I feel like there's always room for improvement, and just looking at these signs that I'm mentioning, for example, here in the snapshot, I just
Yep.
thought it would be important to bring it up to the call right now.
No, that's very important. And I think that's part of the advice process, like recognizing that this snapshot vote that we had, this is a signal. This is a signal vote. What we want to do is gather information from this vote. And what I see is 10 people who voted yes, all yes, 0 no's. And most of the people that are involved in that vote, maybe not so much involved in stewardship or around stewardship or the day-to-day operations. And so when it comes to making sure that we reflect on this as a group within this call in particular, that we say, okay, hey, this is just a signal. Do we have any pushback? Do we need to discuss more? And I think that we should put a hold and say, let's discuss more. Let's keep engaging. But that means we have to really focus on engaging with it. Because then, if we just keep lingering and lingering, nothing gets done. That's the issue. And so if we can, let's start these conversations in the forum. I can instigate at least one push for it, and then see if we can get a conversation started. Because at the end of the day, this is these are tools to help us make decisions and make better decisions. And if this is not the direction we want to go from the Steward working group transformation process, then let's encourage those who have dissenting voices to speak up.
Interestingly, this phenomenon of people flocking together in a boat, it can be modeled. It's actually it's very present in other species. And so yeah, it'd be interesting to just to put like an example, because I guess it might seem very abstract to think about modeling things, and maybe some here think that it's not possible, but it's actually very possible to model like the activities, the what we do as a person, as agents within the DAO, and yeah, this flocking that has been exhibited time and time again over votes. We can model and plan for it, and I bet some interesting insights could spring from actually, yeah, throwing some numbers on this. Yeah, go ahead.
Um, I don't know if we have to revisit, but we should probably raise more awareness. At least, at least I don't know how aware is everyone else, but I wasn't really involved. I read the post very quickly, and so I'll give it a proper look at it. I'll give it a proper look, and then ask questions or whatever. But just wanted to come back to my point again, because I sort of thought of a situation of why we would not want it that way. And I just thought that the way it's set up looks more like a political role. Um, and if I don't know, if I were to do a lot of the things you currently donate, for me to get like properly recognized or compensated, I would have to engage in a political thing to to be elected as a stewards, instead of just being onboarded in the working group as pretty much everyone else does when when they add value to a certain thing. And that's I will probably expand on that on the forum, but I think that's my strong like that's my point right now, and I think that's I think we should move from political
I
stuff.
think it's a good point. I think it's a really good point, and something that should be addressed, because it does become a political issue, and maybe we can't avoid politics, but I think it's worth doing. Worth at least the attempt.
Yeah.
I think we should definitely get rid of the kind of the social power that is inherent or that we promote within these roles of stewardship. At the end of the day, this is role of steward. It's meant to be kind of just like, hey, these are individuals who are capable of being a resource to you as a newcomer. These are people who understand what's going on in the TEC, who understand what's going on within the broader token engineering community, and they can get you plugged in, and that's it.
Right.
And so having any type of social power relationship there is something we should definitely avoid at all costs. Because I want people to, like, if you're a steward, I want people to look at a steward and say, hey, that person can help me, not, hey, I need to know this person to get the fit in, to do whatever, or to be successful. Like, it should never be that way. So
yeah, I totally agree on this point, and I think your example, Nate, actually I think it's pretty good, because it's kind of like the example of an stewardship function being born like in an organic way in the community, right? Like you didn't apply to any position, like you weren't involved in this, like you just did it because you really felt like doing it and you were good at it, and this is the way you wanted to participate and contribute to the community. So I think that kind of like should maybe the route in which we should be going, but maybe it's harder at the same time, because it's kind of like not formalizing stewardship. But I don't know, I just feel like there's something really powerful, really important of your example, and this organic way that you are taking it on the responsibility.
But at the end of the day, I think what you're talking about there is this difference between role and function versus time
Exactly.
commitment and compensation, and those are two things that I don't want us to get mixed together, because I think we frame stewardship into like this like power role and function with like, hey, these are the people who are getting compensated and rewarded, and these are the people who are not. And I think that's a really bad foundation to start discussing contributions to any type of organization.
Yeah, and I think there's actually a lot of confusion, right, with what you're saying. I think there's a lot of confusion between this function and this role and the compensation part of it. I think that's part of the roots of a lot of problems. So maybe like some of the beginning steps that we need to take is clarify this, right? Clarify the actual definition of stewardship. What does it actually mean? What are the responsibilities or the commitments that you take on that? Like truly clarify this that you're talking about. I think that would be important.
Yeah, but in order to do that, I think it's really like we have to figure out what the functions of the entire organization look like. You know, what exactly do we need human capital for? What do we need to organize for? And having that fully understood is a prerequisite for any of those types of equality conversations in terms of understanding how much time you're contributing versus how much you're being compensated or rewarded for. Because then you just have a bunch of people working really hard and not getting compensated or not being recognized, and it's like, well, I don't want to have create these arbitrary roles to exacerbate that disparity. But with that being said, anybody else have any topics? That was a really good conversation. We should definitely post in the forum on this topic, even if it's just like a small snippet. Hey, politics equal bad. Let's put it in there. We just need to have try to kind of inspire a little bit more conversation around it, especially if we have some opposing opinions. So if you can, please do. But outside of that, does anybody else have anything they want to add? Manu?
No, I just wanted to move on to the next issue since I don't know.
Oh, I'm so sorry. My apologies, man.
That's fine. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I do think this is important, and it more important than the issue I'm bringing because it affects more people. But we're not going to solve it right now. So if we could move on to the next issue, I appreciate that.
The Communitas onboarding guide role.
Yeah. So, okay. So this is somewhat contentious, and I'm tired of feeling a way about it. So I'm just gonna try to average out the controversy.
Don't tiptoe. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, the main thing, the issue is, okay, so as most of you know, I used to be an onboarding guide for about 4 months earlier this year until I decided after a suggestion from Tam that if I were to explore other roles within other working groups, that would allow a new contributor at the time, which was Costa, to come into the guide role I'd be leaving. And so I agreed. I trained Costa as an onboarding guy, stepped down from my role, and he's been an onboarding guide ever since. This was when there were a lot of roles available. It was like a different time from what we are right now, right? So over the weekend, I informed Costa that I wanted to come back as an onboarding guide, and I suggested that we split the role between the two of us, and he declined. And so that made me think if that was his prerogative, or if that's a decision for the working group as a whole, or for the stewards, or for Gravity. Actually, it was either for the working group or for Gravity. I talked with Juanca. I opened the Gravity case, and he suggested that this issue could be brought into the stewards because there's no precedent for it, which is why I'm bringing it in today.
Is this a paid role within the working group?
Yeah, it's a paid role. It's 1,820. It's 1,820 Raptexai, which is why I thought that we could split it because it's way above the median of what most other roles receive. Yeah, I don't know if it's relevant to. I do think it's relevant that it's way above. It's to put in context. It's about 3 times what stewards make. Twice what Edu made as community steward. 4 times what I make at marketing role. 2 times what working coordination leads make, and so on. Right. So, which is why I thought that we could split it. if at the end of the day it would benefit the TC in that we will be onboarding more people. And so
I mean, if I'm dead honest with you, this is I mean it's a lot for the onboarding guide role. And have you talked with Edu about this topic? And
yes,
okay,
Edu,
and Edu,
okay. Edu, I brought this on. I brought this up in Comunitas. He didn't want to discuss. He just told me to put it on Gravity. And he said that he didn't want to be involved, or he chose not to be involved because he's moving out of the TC. He's retiring, or he's changing jobs. So he didn't think that he would be the right one to mediate or to be involved in this. And so I talked with Juanca, and he suggested that I brought out here for the stewards because, I mean, I understand Costa's position. I offered him an alternative. Like, I offered him to look over other roles so that we could, split it, and the both of us, or him, or whatever, take on, for example, the special projects role, so that his salary wouldn't be diminished or decreased. And yeah, to me, well, I'll open it up to you.
No, I mean that's a tough one. I think Gravity is the right people to talk to in this situation. I don't know if Juanca, you've already have it on your radar, I assume, but yeah.
Yeah, of course. I mean, what I think here is that the Comunitas working group lead should be aware of this. And if Edu is stepping down, we should at least wait for Tam. And I told this to Manu, that this shouldn't be something personal, but something more from coordination, because the idea is not that, okay, I need this because I need it, but to say, okay, is this role's impact multiplied if there is two people, or is it not? So I think this is something that should be talked about, but better within the group of the people who is leading and who is having this budget, because actually this proposal was funded, and once that the proposal is funded, the funds are out from the TC, and they are on the multisig. So it's on the people who is part of that multisig to say if they think that maybe they overestimated or overpriced some work, or I mean, that's the different criteria that each group and each working group has, and the agency that each group has according to the distribution. And what is true is that the proposal says what Costa is stating. So for right now, Manu stating that he wants to change something. It's something out of the proposal, so it's something that should be talked about. But
so to me, I don't think it is. So we have guides as a plural term here within the proposal itself, and we have our one guide, but previously there were multiple guides within the previous working groups. So I think the budget for this monthly, so we have approximate monthly of 1820, or let me see, 1820 a month for all the guides that participate. So that's kind of a guides monthly budget. And so I would assume that if there's more than one guide, they would have to split these things. And to me, that's pretty straightforward, unless there's some type of miscommunication with Costa. But this is something that I would kind of focus on, the second term funding proposal here, which lists Costa as the only guide, and then we have the first Communitas funding proposal, the 3-month one here, in which the same thing was 1820 for guides. Wait, no, they have 3640. And there are 2 guides. Yeah, I guess 1820. That's a lot for a guide.
Yeah, that has been something
Hmm.
that Stephanie has been trying to talk to us about, that the salaries on the TC, and yeah, it's something that each working group had the agency to spend their funds.
Yep.
And there could be easily people who had 4 or 5 roles, and maybe taking something easy, but so like only like trying to play the game. And it's something that it's just very interesting behavior that we see in every DAO. And we are not exceptions from what happens in other DAOs, and that's what I am trying to say with that. If we see an example like Aragon, they made some decisions that around centralization, and now they are taking also a step back from that. So when we talk about centralization or nominization or politics, it's always a complex topic that should involve the more people possible, and that's why I would like to have more stewards on to have some of these discussions, because yeah, we have had some progress already. We've been working on these 2 years, and sometimes I hear like things that we were talking 1 year ago, and that's not the idea, to lose the memory of what we're doing.
Yeah. And so this is, yeah, and I agree. This is a 3-month proposal, and so this proposal and agreement would have to be revamped at the end of, I believe, this month. So there's only 1 more month left of this, and then you'd have an opportunity for a new organizational structure within Communitas, as well as new compensation roles. But
That's assuming a new Communitas working group proposal will pass. Edu was saying that
there might not be, yeah.
Yeah, it might not be given our circumstances. Edu
Yeah.
said that his vision for Communitas, although he won't be here to see it realized or not, is that the Communitas working group can dissolve and that the functions of all the roles can become part of the culture of practice. I think that's hyper optimistic, and I think that if there's not a role for it, then the function will not be performed in the same capacity or at all. And I don't think, I think the issue
Manu,
here is Costa is not willing to compromise.
but Manu, I think we should have this conversation in a proper case management session, because this is the Steward session, and it's turning into something also without the people who is involved in this. And it's good to always have the other people involved and present when we are talking about them. So I invite you that it's good that we share this, but that we leave this on the ground for some time, waiting for more people to come and join the conversation.
I will second that, but I do want to thank you for bringing it up, because it's put a lot to think about, and it's things that we need to really review as a whole, as a group. So thank you, Manu, for that, and thank you everybody for the contributions to the Stewards Weekly. We are 10 minutes over. I appreciate staying around and listening. I'll talk to you guys soon.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
See you later.